Everybody be seated, please. You may proceed, Mr. Clark.
Thank you. So, Ms. Magbanua, I believe where we left off was when you started to seek employment from the Adelsons, Charlie
Yes,
Adelson. I'm going to, Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm showing you the pre-market defense exhibit 33. Take a look at the date and the substance of the text message, and when your memory has been refreshed, let me know.
What was the date you said?
She has it.
I didn't say.
Oh, okay.
You remember? What date was it that you asked Charlie Adelson to help you out with employment?
That was on June 24th of 2014.
2014. And these are messages that are from Charlie's iCloud account, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Not your phone.
I believe so.
Now, why were you asking Charlie Adelson to help you with employment? Explain to the jury.
The primary reason of why
Yes.
I needed insurance for my children, and in order for me to get insurance for them, you kind of have to be in some type of bracket where you're making X amount of money so that I can get insurance.
So just to clarify, who were you seeking? Is this insurance that you were trying to get from the state of Florida for your 2 children?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was this through what agency?
DCF?
The Department of Children and Families?
Yes, ma'am.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if you made too much money on paper, you would have to pay privately for the insurance.
Yes, you'd have to pay privately, or whoever you're employed with, you'd have to, sometimes some places that I work for didn't offer insurance, so it was really, I needed to get insurance for them.
You understand essentially you were defrauding the Department of Children and Families
Yes, ma'am.
to try and get insurance for your children.
Yes, ma'am.
That is what you were doing.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, did you not work for Charlie Adelson at all?
No, I worked for him.
All right. Did you work at the Adelson Institute?
No, ma'am.
Describe for the jury what you did for Charlie Adelson.
Well, basically, since he was doing me this favor, I was kind of like his assistant. If he needed any help with, like, or if a patient or something was, or, he needed help with, I would help him with that. And he had, like, rental places, too, so I spoke to him about that, too.
When you say rental places, what do you mean?
He owned a couple properties, and then he needed to collect from the tenants in that place or try to find out if everything is up to par in that building or complex.
Would you be responsible for collecting rent, or?
Initially, he wanted me to try to collect rent, but those tenants were so difficult, so I just didn't do it.
So you weren't working steady hours for the Adelsons?
No, ma'am.
Was it just odd jobs that you did for Charlie Adelson?
Yes, ma'am.
But you had a steady paycheck?
Yes, ma'am.
You saw all of the evidence of when those paychecks began.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any reason to doubt that the accuracy of those documents?
No, ma'am.
It seems to be a fair and accurate representation of when you were receiving the paychecks.
Yes, ma'am.
And how long did you receive those paychecks?
I believe all the way up to 2016.
Around the time when
Yeah.
Mr. Garcia was arrested.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that sound about right?
I believe so.
And we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So just so that we're clear, on paper with your tax returns, it would only show you making a minimal amount of money to the government,
Yes, ma'am.
and you weren't declaring any of your cash tips.
No, ma'am.
Is that the only place that you got cash from, was from your cash tips?
The only employment place?
No. Is that the only place that, well, did your mom give you money?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Mr. Garcia give you cash?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he steadily give you cash?
Not steadily, no. There wasn't like a set date that he had to give me anything. It would be whenever he had.
When he would, was there ever a time that he'd come to you with this, well, would you consider $1,000 a significant amount of cash?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And would he give you significant amount of cash to
Yes,
you?
ma'am. Yeah.
You didn't ask him where the money came from?
No, ma'am.
Why?
It could be from illegal activities that.
Objection, Judge.
It's the same.
Were you aware that Mr. Garcia was selling cocaine?
No, ma'am.
Objection, Judge.
Overruled.
Did Mr. Garcia have a steady form of legitimate employment?
No, ma'am.
But he would show up on occasion and just give you cash.
Yes, ma'am.
Why would you take it without asking where it came from?
It's for my kids.
Did you have some suspicion about the location or where that money came from?
No.
Okay. But you just didn't ask.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk to you about another personal topic, your breast augmentation.
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you wanted to have breast augmentation?
For as long as I can remember. Since high school, probably.
Who referred you to Dr. Raudner?
Referred me? Well, I asked a couple of people, but I believe Charlie gave me the information for Dr. Rudner.
Do you remember, oh, it's Raudner.
Yeah,
Okay.
Raudner, I don't know.
Did it, why, well, Charlie, Mr. Adelson was in the medical field.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Did you receive any other recommendations from other people?
I believe so, but I can't be sure.
Okay, but Charlie is the one that recommended it.
Yes, ma'am.
And who paid for your breast implants?
I did.
All right. How did you pay for your breast implants?
Well, from my cash tips.
Now, we saw how much your breast implants cost,
Yes, ma'am.
and it was around $4,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that sound about right?
I believe so.
When you pay in cash, do you get any incentive for paying in cash?
Yes, ma'am. Like my initial consultation, which was like in the beginning of that year,
Mm-hmm.
that I got it. It was fairly high, so I kind of, I spoke to the doctor. Well, I actually spoke to the treatment coordinator,
Mm-hmm.
and I told her, I was like, if I was able to pay in cash, can you give me some type of discount? So they gave me a discount.
So when you got that quote, you basically worked your cash tips until you saved up enough money.
Yes, ma'am.
Did Charlie Adelson cheat on you, to your knowledge?
Like, was he speaking to other women?
Yes.
Not to my knowledge, no. I mean, I can't be sure what he was doing.
Would you have considered it cheating on you?
If he was talking to other people,
Yes.
it wasn't like that. So yeah, I guess since if we were talking to each other at that time, so yeah, I guess I'd say,
Do you
I
remember
feel
anything?
like somebody's cheating on me.
Do you remember ever getting into an argument with him over a specific case of infidelity or no?
No.
When was your breast augmentation?
I believe it was October.
So this is October of 2014.
Yes, ma'am.
This is another big event that you remember, right?
Yes.
Now, when did you officially start working for Charlie Adelson?
September, I believe.
And we can
It
rely
was
on
like
the
a
date
month
of the
before
record.
that, yes.
Okay. Were you broken up at that time
Broken up with him?
with Charlie? Around the time of the breast augmentation?
Yes.
Were you still
Like, were we not seeing each other as often?
You'd let me know. I don't, what you
Yes,
remember
yeah.
on that time.
Mhm.
So you guys were no longer seeing each other as much?
Yes.
Okay. How did your relationship with Charlie transition from a sexual relationship to more of a friendship? Because I don't want to use the term breakup.
Yeah.
Am I saying it correctly or?
Yeah, because it's not like we had an official date that we were, started going out. It's not like we have an anniversary date. So it's just, we just started, hanging out more often with each other.
Is it fair to say that you got frustrated with Charlie because he wasn't as available as he once was?
Yes.
Okay. I know this is another term that people use. Did it seem like he was ghosting you?
Probably.
Okay. And what does that mean?
Like when they kind of just dwindle down and not there.
Not
as
answering your
often.
calls as much? Do you remember when that happened?
I can't put a specific time. No.
Okay. But is it fair to say that was before the breast augmentation?
Yes.
Okay. Was Mr. Garcia there to help you with your
Yes.
recovery?
Yeah.
Who were you living with at the time that you had the breast augmentation?
By myself and the kids.
Your mom wasn't with you anymore?
No.
Where was your mom?
My mom lived up north with my brother,
Which brother?
with Francis,
Okay. Your brother Francis. Where does he live?
in Tamarack.
Where is Tamarack in relation to North Miami? Is it up north?
Yes.
Is it in Fort Lauderdale?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
Oh.
sorry, I didn't hear her answer to the
Yes.
question where she was living in October 2014. I think she answered, I just didn't hear it.
I was living in an apartment with the kids.
Do you remember which apartment? The
It
Chesapeake
was
Beach one?
around 125th in Biscayne, like around that vicinity.
So you've moved from the North Bay Village apartment into now a different apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
But Mr. Garcia didn't move in with you?
No, ma'am.
Did he stay overnight with you when you were recovering from the breast surgery?
Yeah, he took care of me the whole time.
Now, the first couple of weeks with breast augmentation, are you practically bedridden?
Actually, I recovered pretty quick, so I mean, I was pretty much driving on the 5th day.
Oh.
Yeah.
But even though Mr. Garcia was stepping up and helping out with the kids,
Mhm.
were you back together?
At that time, no.
Correct. Why did you move out to the North Bay Village apartment?
I moved out of it. My rent was just so high.
Do you remember at that time what your rent was?
I think they raised it to like 1,700.
A month?
Yes.
And that was too much money for you?
Yes, ma'am.
The apartment that you moved into when you said on 125th, how much was that rent?
I know it was a lot lower. It was probably like, I don't know if it's like 1,100 or somewhere around that area.
And how long were you in that apartment?
I think a year.
A full year.
I believe so.
Did you sign a 1-year lease?
Yes.
In January of 2015, so this is now almost 2 months after your breast augmentation. Are you fully recovered?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember when you returned to work at the clubs?
Not that I remember. Like after my surgery?
After your surgery.
Probably a couple weeks after that.
Did you go back to work?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Ms. Magbanua, I'm showing you what has been pre-marked as a defense exhibit number 22. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
Who is that?
Me?
Okay. Do you remember around what time that picture was taken?
Not the specific time, but it seems accurate
And what's the
on
date?
the time stamp.
Make sure you speak to that microphone near to you, will you? Looking down, it's hard to hear you.
It's on 4/7/2015.
Do you know where you are in that photograph?
Yes, I was in Fate nightclub.
All right. And it's a fair and accurate representation of what you looked like when you were working at the club?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You're right. This time I'd move Defense Exhibit 22 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
No objection.
Be admitted.
Permission to publish in the jury?
You might.
It'll take a minute. The turn
And
off.
in the meantime, is it, without sounding too superficial, did your tips increase
Yes, ma'am.
after your surgery?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And in the meantime, around January of 2015, was Mr. Garcia in an accident?
January 2015. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of accident was he in?
A motorcycle accident.
Was he in that accident with anybody else?
Yes.
Who was he in the accident with?
To that girl.
Hmm?
Shrimp.
That
Yeah.
shrimp. Okay.
Mhm.
And at this time, I'll publish the photograph.
Oh.
So Katie, when you were working the bottle service at the clubs, that's your uniform.
Yes, ma'am.
And how many hours would you work at night?
I mean, it depends. It depends on when they tell us to come in.
Now, this was about 5 years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You look a lot different now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Why?
I've been incarcerated.
What is that right there? For the record, I'm pointing at a red thing in the photograph.
That's like the separator, so like when our clients come into the club.
Going to VIP?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we're now talking about the motorcycle accident.
Yes, ma'am.
To your knowledge, was this a pretty serious motorcycle accident?
Yes, ma'am.
Was he severely injured?
Yes, ma'am.
And by he, I mean Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Do you know if Miss Carmona, aka Shrimp, was she seriously injured too?
I believe so.
How did you find out that he had been in this car accident?
Actually, I think Rivera called me and told me that he was in a car accident. I mean, not car accident, a motorcycle accident.
Do you remember where you were when you got that message?
I was in Disney
With who?
with the kids.
Okay. And do you remember what your reaction was to Mr. Rivera when he told you that Mr. Garcia had been in a terrible car accident?
Yeah. I was, I was worried. I said, is he okay? And they said, yeah, he's okay, but he's like badly hurt. But at that time, I was kind of, I was not doing well with him.
And did Mr. Rivera tell you who he was on the bike with?
Yes.
Okay. Did that have something to do with
Yes.
how you felt about it?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Mr. Garcia, to your knowledge, receive any money as a settlement from that accident?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you know how much money he received?
Not to the top of my head.
But it's fair to say it, definitely you and Mr. Garcia are not back together in January of 2015, which is
No.
when the bike accident happened.
No.
Okay. Let's talk about the Lexus. Okay. How did you come into possession of the Lexus?
How did I come into possession of it?
How'd you get it?
Like, Well, I was borrowing it before because I got in a car accident and like around April of
Oh.
2015.
So let's start there. You got
Yes.
into a car accident of April 2015.
Yes.
Were you driving?
Yes.
What car were you driving?
My Mazda,
What color was it?
white.
Okay. Was it an SUV?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have any access to any other vehicles?
No, ma'am.
And around April of 2015, with this car accident, do you remember if you and Mr. Garcia were still in a relationship? Or were you still broken up?
On April 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, we weren't together at that time.
Not together, okay. So, the car, is it totaled? The
My
Mazda?
car?
Yeah.
I got rear-ended, so it was pretty damaged.
And did you ask to borrow the Lexus, or did Charlie Adelson offer for you to borrow the Lexus?
No, I asked him.
You asked him to borrow it?
I believe so.
Okay. And let's talk about this vehicle, okay? Was it well kept?
Yes.
Clean?
Yes.
Okay. And, but it had a lot of miles on it?
Yes.
All right. So you were driving it for how long when he lent it to you in early 2015? Did you ever give it back to him?
I think I did.
When did you pay for the Lexus?
I don't remember the exact date.
Did you see the title transfer?
Yes.
Okay. With the date, did you pay for it around the time that you changed the registration, or you paid for it at a different time?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you know how you paid for it?
Yes.
How did you pay for it?
Cash?
Okay. Is the amount that's reflected on the DMV registration, is that an accurate amount that you paid for it?
Yes.
So you did pay $1,700 for it?
Yes.
It was below value.
Yes.
Okay. Was Mr. Adelson doing you a favor?
Yes.
Did you and Sigfredo get back together in 2015?
Yes.
When?
I think it was in May, the Pacquiao fight.
And why does the Pacquiao fight stand out as a significant date for you?
Because that was the day that like we hung out that night, and that's a significant date for me to know that when we officially got back together.
Now, between July of 2014 to almost a year later, was Mr. Garcia still actively pursuing a relationship with you?
From 2015 to
Between July of 2014, when Charlie started fading away in the background,
okay.
until you get back together with Sigfredo in 2015, was Mr. Garcia actively pursuing you in terms of trying to get back together with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Did it make it easier because Mr. Adelson was now out of the picture?
Oh, yes.
Did you and Charlie Adelson continuously talk up until Mr. Garcia was arrested?
Yes, ma'am.
So from 2013 until Mr. Garcia's arrest in 2016, you continued a relationship, a friendship with
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Adelson. So if we looked at your phone records, there would be a constant communication with you and Mr. Adelson.
Yes, ma'am.
Also constant communication with Mr. Garcia.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you tell Mr. Garcia after May of 2015 that you were still talking to Mr. Adelson?
No.
Did you ever tell Mr. Garcia that you were working for Mr. Adelson?
No.
Why?
He would be very angry.
Okay. You kept that from him.
Yes, ma'am.
Was there a time when you began working for Jerome Obed?
Yes, ma'am.
Who is Jerome Obed?
Well, he used to be Charlie's roommate, I guess, in his house.
The house that has been discussed throughout the course of this trial?
Yes, ma'am.
The house that's in Fort Lauderdale?
Yes, ma'am. In Whale Harbor.
Whale Harbor Drive or something like that, right? So, Jerome Obed used to live in that house with Mr. Adelson?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Were you, how often would you be at Mr. Adelson's house when you guys were dating? Did you ever sleep over?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember there being a safe in his house?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was it a big safe or a little safe?
I think it was big.
Like, and you saw my hands. I kind of went up to my height, and then I'm 5'4" plus heels, and I went down here. So about my height, like.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that's a big safe.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever see what was inside of the safe?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did Mr. Adelson ever take or count money in your presence?
No, ma'am.
Like stacks of hundreds?
No, ma'am.
Right. Now, when you were working for Mr. Obed, was he still a roommate of Mr. Adelson's?
Not quite sure.
Okay. What did he do for a living?
Dr.
Mr.
Obed?
Dr. Obed.
He's a dermatologist.
And what did you do for him in his office?
Same thing. Office, the front desk, office work, clerical, answering phones, faxing.
Did Charlie Adelson assist you in obtaining this employment?
Yeah, I believe he lost his employee, or his employee was going to move to another job, so he needed somebody in the front. So he's like, why don't you hire Katie?
Okay. Did Mr. Obed agree to pay you under the table?
We had some type of agreement, yes.
Okay. But were you getting paid legitimately some, but
Yes.
also getting extra under the table?
Yes, ma'am.
Why was he doing that for you?
Well, because he knew my situation, I told him, I was like, the only way that I can really take this job is if you kind of put me in some type of bracket again so that I can get insurance for the kids. Because he looked into trying to get insurance for all the employees, but there's only like 3 of us.
Okay.
So it was going to be very high, I guess.
All right. And then how long did you work for Dr. Obed?
Maybe a couple months
Now, what's the next job that you had after that?
after Dr. Obed. So we're looking at 2015, 2016. See, I'm a little mixed up on my dates because I don't even know sometimes what year we're on.
Okay. So I'm going to move forward to Optima Realty. Okay.
Okay.
Who got you that job?
Yindra?
Was Yindra already working there?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's Yindra Velasquez Mascaro?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And describe for the jury what your setup was in terms of office space when you were working at Optima Realty.
Well, she worked for Optima Realty.
Okay.
It was the realtor that I worked for. I think he was just kind of like an independent realtor.
Mm-hmm.
And we, since she had her own office and there was like a little section, it's really small. It's like there's offices after offices, but instead of cubicles, it was like a glass. And she's like, oh, like if we set up a little table, maybe you can just be in the office with me. So then I took up like a little corner of her office space.
So you guys shared office space.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I know you said you didn't remember, but you are now aware of the fact that your phone was being wiretapped by the FBI, right?
Was I aware of it?
Not then. You're aware now.
Oh, yes.
Okay. But back then you had no idea that anyone was listening on your phone calls, right?
No, ma'am.
If I played you a phone call of you from April 14th of 2016, would that refresh your recollection as to when you began work with Optima Realty?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that sound about right for 14?
You said April
14th.
14th of 2016, right? Yes.
And what I'll do is instead of playing it for you now, I'll come back to that, and then on the break we'll play it. And
Okay.
okay. So now we're in 2016.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How are things with you and Mr. Garcia?
They're great.
Where were you guys living?
We were living in, like, the exact address?
No, you
It
can give me like a
was
general
like-
area.
Around 125th and Biscayne again, but it was just on the other side.
So it's a different location from the one that you were living at before?
Yes.
So you and Mr. Garcia then move in together?
Mhm.
What kind of, was it an apartment, a condo, or
It was a little townhouse.
a little townhouse?
Mhm.
Okay. What was your rent, if you remember?
Probably like 1,500.
Okay, and that was between you and Mr. Garcia?
Yes.
And the kids were living
Yes.
there too?
Mhm.
Okay. So in 2016, you now realize around April, something weird happened with Mr. Adelson.
Yes.
Okay. Now, up until this incident of someone approaching him and threatening his mother on the street, or not him, threatening his mother on the street,
Mhm.
you guys were still in constant communication, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the wiretaps reflect that.
Yes, ma'am.
You've listened to all the wiretaps in this case. Oh, that's a question, yes.
I
Have you
think
listened
so.
to all the, yeah, the ones I provided to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what we heard in court is not all of the wiretaps.
Yes, ma'am. Bless you.
So I want to go over some things in terms of what we have all described as the bump,
Yes.
okay? And I have the transcripts. If we need to refresh your recollection, okay? You were sitting in court and you heard these phone calls being played, right?
Mhm.
But it wasn't the first time you heard them.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So now I want to reference you to the first call, and since you were a party to this conversation, you'll be able to help explain to the jury from what you remember what was going on, okay? So I'm going to reference call 1392, which was on April 19th of 2016, okay? This is apparently the first phone call to you from Mr. Adelson.
Okay.
All right. This is the first time that he has informed you that someone approached his mother on the street.
Okay.
Okay? You remember that, right?
Yes.
Did you hear yourself on the recording when you
Yes,
said,
ma'am.
"What?"
Mhm.
Can you describe for the jury why you answered him that way?
Yeah, I was confused.
Did you have any idea or know what was going on?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And Mr. Adelson told you that someone walked up to his mom and referenced an ex-girlfriend.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Didn't Mr. Adelson explain to you why he was calling you
Did he explain to me why he was
on that
calling
call?
me?
Like, did he say to you, you're my last ex-girlfriend, this is the reason I'm calling you?
Yeah.
What was your concern at this point in terms of what Charlie Adelson was telling you? Did you have any concern that someone was saying your name?
Yeah. Like, why are they mentioning my name?
But at this point, you don't even know if it's really you.
Yes. Because he said ex-girlfriend.
Okay. You even asked him, who said I did anything wrong, right? In fact, Mr. Adelson said, I thought when I spoke to my mom, she said it involved, they mentioned your name in it. That's why I'm calling you. That's what he told you.
Okay.
Okay. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes.
All right. Did you have any idea what was going on at that point?
No.
All right. Now, he calls you again, Mr. Adelson, right? And he actually tells you in that phone call, which is the day before you meet with him at Dolce Vita. You
Okay.
remember that, right?
Yes.
Okay. He references in that call, which is call number 1394, that there was something about an exchange of a paper
Okay.
and that he was going to show it to you
Okay.
when he saw you the next day. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And he said, you're my best friend. I'll show you what it is, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Sustained.
What happened the very next day?
When we met up in Dolce Vita?
Mhm.
What do you mean, like, what happened? Like, we went to Dolce Vita and he was just, like, talking.
Okay, so let's talk about Dolce Vita. Were you aware at that time that he had already met with his mother?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay. When you sat down with him at Dolce Vita,
Mm-hmm.
did he show you a paper with Dan Markel's face on it?
No, ma'am.
Did you see any paper with a phone number on it?
No, ma'am.
Anything with any numbers on it?
No, ma'am. He didn't show me any paper.
He didn't show you any paper.
Mm-mm.
What, to the best of your recollection, was he telling you at that table? I know he talks a lot.
Yes. He said, I know he mentioned about somebody approaching his mother. I don't know if he said girlfriend or specifically said my name at that time because I don't remember that day that clearly. But, I mean, that's about it. He just started going off on scenarios and I kind of just lost him.
Did he mention anything to you about a homicide out of Tallahassee?
No, ma'am.
Did he mention anything about his ex-brother-in-law being murdered?
No, ma'am.
He kept that from you.
Yes, ma'am.
Did he ask you to do anything for him?
He asked if I can call that number.
Did he explain to you why he wanted you to call it?
Because I believe they said ex-girlfriend or my name.
Okay. Did he ever explain to you why he didn't want to call it?
No.
Did you ask?
No.
Describe for the jury as best as you can Charlie Adelson's personality.
I mean, he just kind of goes off and talks and talks and talks sometimes. And, I mean, I just sit there and listen. But half the time, I'm not really paying attention.
Now, you've been incarcerated for the past 3 years, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you had an opportunity to view the Dolce Vita video that was introduced into evidence?
I believe so, towards the end.
I was able to show it to you.
Yes.
Were you able to decipher any of the conversation on that phone call?
No.
Even though you were sitting there?
Yes.
Do you hear yourself a lot?
No.
It's Charlie talking?
Yes.
Okay. But you were there.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything from what you saw in that video, did it jog your memory as to any specifics?
No, ma'am.
Had he mentioned a homicide, would you have remembered that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. After you leave Dolce Vita, did you call Mr. Garcia?
I don't believe so.
Did you text Mr. Garcia?
No.
The best way for us to know if that happened would be if we had your records.
Yeah, if I looked at my phone records.
Okay. Now, you don't speak to Mr. Garcia or see him until when? After getting this information from Mr. Adelson.
Yes.
When is the next time do you think you speak or see Mr. Garcia? Because you guys are living together.
We live together, yeah, so probably when I got home.
All right. Do you remember if you specifically told Mr. Garcia at that time who was being threatened?
Who was being threatened? I don't think I specifically said who it was.
Is it possible that you did?
I can't say if I did it.
And I'm just trying to try and get as close, but if you don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Is it fair to say at some point he does find out that this person who's being threatened is Charlie?
Well, his mother.
Well, yes, but the relation is to Charlie.
Yes.
How did he feel about the fact that he now found out that you were still talking to him?
He was angry.
Okay. You remember the phone call where you are in an argument with Mr. Garcia? We heard it played in court, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know what Mr. Garcia meant when he said, the less you know, the better?
No.
Okay. Why didn't you ask him any questions well, apart from the fact that he hung up on you, but did you ever follow up what he meant by that?
No, because we were probably arguing at that time, and he just never really tells me anything, like, to that extent, just, Katie, you don't need to know anything.
Did you ever call that number?
Did I ever call it? No.
Did you tell Charlie you were going to do it?
Yes.
You lied to him.
Yes.
Who did you ask to make that phone call?
Sigfredo.
Why did you ask Mr. Garcia to make that phone call on your behalf?
Well, he's the father of my kids. If I needed something, I'd ask him.
But you told Mr. Adelson that you did in fact call.
Yes. Well, now that I reviewed the phone calls, yes. I probably just said it just to shut him up because he keeps on and on about, the situation.
Why didn't you call the police?
Really wasn't my place to call the police.
What do you mean
I
by-
know I heard myself saying it because at that time I was already frustrated at the situation. But for me to, what am I going to call the police and say, I have a friend that's getting threatened? I have a friend's mom that's getting threatened and might have said my name. They're going to think I'm crazy.
So you never do call the police?
No.
Now, we hear on a phone call, a very long phone call, and you sounded very frustrated.
Yes, ma'am.
You were using a lot of bad language
I
with
know.
Charlie. Why were you frustrated with him?
Well, first off, that phone call is very embarrassing.
Oh.
I didn't even know that I could say that many bad words in a 23-minute span, but
Is it weird to listen to yourself?
yes.
You had any idea at this point that you were being recorded?
No.
Would you have stopped using your phone if you were involved in criminal activity?
Of course.
So why are you yelling at him on the phone like that?
Why was I yelling at Charlie
Yeah.
like that? He's just, because he keeps on, it's the same thing over and over. I don't know how many different phone calls. Frankly, I don't even know if this is all the phone calls because it seems like times jump and dates jump. So where's the calls in the middle of the phone log that we received? So I was frustrated because it was over and over and over the same thing, different scenarios, and it's just I thought he was losing it.
Now, is it weird for Mr. Adelson to be acting all paranoid?
No, he's usually a paranoid person.
Why?
I don't know exactly why, but he's just always has different scenarios for situations, and he thinks it's kind of like a know-it-all. He thinks he knows.
Did
Why?
he ever try to come off to you talk about, ties to the Russian mafia or anything like that?
I think I've heard him mention something like that before, but
In your relationship with him, does he
Yeah.
talk grandiose
Yeah.
things all the time? But it's fair to call him a paranoid person, right?
yes,
Now, I want to talk to you about the phone call where you are talking to Mr. Garcia.
yes,
And you say to him, you give him a dollar amount, and you correct him and saying this is not for Ethan's clothes,
yes,
and it's a number that you're giving him a dollar amount.
yes.
You weren't talking about clothes, were you?
No, I wasn't.
You were talking in code.
Yes.
All right. Now, at that time, do you know why you were talking in code?
At that specific time, I might have been around my children or at work.
Okay. Did Charlie ever specifically request of you, to limit your conversations on the phone?
No,
Did Charlie ever say to you, don't talk on this phone anymore, Katherine?
no.
Okay. Now, the next phone call that you have, you do sound like you are speaking in terms of realty. It sounds like you're talking in code. Are you talking in code?
What's the next phone call?
Okay. All right, I think this is April 26th.
Oh,
It was at 4:33 p.m. It's called V. And you are referencing that you got the number mixed up. And then you're kind of talking about a really good client in terms of realty, real estate ventures.
okay.
Were you talking about real estate ventures, if you remember?
For that specific phone call, I might not have been.
Is it possible that you were talking in code?
Probably.
Why would you be talking in code about real estate stuff?
I was probably next to Yendra at work
And where does Yendra work?
in realty.
In a realty
Yeah.
office.
Mm-hmm.
You also remember call Z, correct? Which is April 24th of 2016, that talking about flushing the problem.
Uh,
Do
The-
you remember that one?
I think so.
Who initially answered the phone?
Yindra,
Yindra.
yes,
And that's why Charlie was saying, I thought I was talking to you.
yes.
All right.
Kind of do sound alike on the phone now that I hear.
You never thought you sounded alike before?
No.
Now, when you say he was referencing you want the problem flushed,
Mm-hmm.
was that in anything directly related to what was going on, or he was just saying that?
Objection, speculation.
It's the same.
You have no idea what he was talking about.
No idea what he's talking about.
Is that something that was very common when you're talking to Charlie Adelson?
Yes.
You also remember a phone call where he starts saying things like, Tuto, Taco, but he said Tuto's name. Remember
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Do you remember that it's almost like he was saying he didn't know Tuto's name? Do you
Yes.
remember that?
Objection, leading.
Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
He knew who Tuto was, didn't he?
Yes, ma'am.
Objection, leading.
Did he know
Let's
who,
not lead your own witness, please.
did he know who Tuto was?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know that?
I've said his name
Okay.
to him.
Did you find that strange that he was saying that to you on the phone?
Yes.
And on these recordings, there are recordings of you talking about you working for Charlie, right?
Yes, ma'am.
There's also a recording of you talking about paying for the Lexus, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Then we also heard a phone call. The last phone call that we heard between you and Charlie was on May 13th of 2016, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But there are many other recorded phone calls after that, right?
I would think so.
In fact, let's jump forward now to when Mr. Garcia gets arrested. Okay? That's a day that you remember.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. How did you find out that Mr. Garcia was arrested?
How did I find out? How did I find out that day? I was
You need
looking.
to keep your voice up, please.
I believe I was on the phone with him, and I think he thought somebody was like following him, and that was like probably my last conversation.
Did he come home and tell you about the fact that agents came to his job
Yeah, that was the day prior to that, I believe.
the day before?
Yes.
Did anything weird happen to you on that day?
Apparently they were knocking at the same time at my door because I was working from home at that time.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
You're in the townhouse that we spoke about, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And we can rely on the dates as being the same day that the detectives went and spoke to Mr. Garcia at his job, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What happened while you're at home by yourself?
So somebody knocked hard on the door.
Describe it for me.
It was just like a loud knock, like it's the police. It's like they knock loud and like that, you know. And I started freaking out because my dog was in my backyard at that time, and he was just barking crazy. So I kind of like peeked out, and I don't know. I just saw like some movement in the backyard, but I didn't really know what was going on.
Okay. Did the person outside that was knocking identify themselves?
No, ma'am.
They didn't say, open the door, police?
No, ma'am.
Did they tell you why they wanted to talk to you?
No, ma'am.
Did you look through do you have a peephole?
I think I looked through like the kitchen window, and then I just saw like their shadow. It
So
was, like,
what did you see outside?
Like two figures outside.
Were they dressed in uniform?
No, they're in civilian clothes.
Was there a marked police unit in front of your house?
No, there was actually no car in front of the house at that time. That's why I was like, who are these people?
So there are two men banging at your door.
Yes.
Do you call anyone?
Yes.
Who do you call?
Sigfredo?
Okay. And that phone call was recorded.
Yes. I was calling his job.
You heard that phone call, right?
Yes.
Can you describe your demeanor at that time?
I was freaking out. I was just like, I'm by myself. There's two possibly males in the front, and then I was just kind of like looking through the back. My dog was going crazy. I was going to the front, and like they are not saying anything, but they're just standing there.
So you just ignored them?
Yes.
You had any idea why the police was coming to talk to you?
No, ma'am.
But Sigfredo comes home later that evening, right?
Yes.
What does he tell you about what happened to him at work?
Well, he actually told me over the phone.
What did he tell you?
When I was, because finally, like, one of his coworkers, I believe, picked up the phone and was like, oh, there's feds over here talking to him. I was like, the feds? Why are they talking to him?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was kind of like a back and forth finally, and then one of his coworkers, because then he had to hang up. I don't know if he had to go back and talk to them, but one of his coworkers came, picked up the phone, and then that's when I told him, I was like who's around my house? And he's like, oh, I'm gonna come by over there, because I'm like, there's possibly two guys that's knocking at the door,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm by myself.
Okay. Did this
So-
person, to
Yeah.
your knowledge, drive around?
Yes. ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember who this person was? I don't know if you said his name.
I can't think of the top of my head his name right now.
But was it one of Mr. Garcia's friends or your friend or?
His coworker.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when he kind of circled around your house, did he give you any information as to what he observed?
Yeah. He
What did
said
he
that
say?
there's probably like federal agents in an unmarked car, like outside, like not even outside of my door, but like probably a block down.
So they parked their car down the street
Yes.
and then walked up to your door.
Yes.
What, if you remember, what do you and Mr. Garcia talk about that night? Did you ask him, like, why are the
Well-
feds coming to your job?
That night, well, because when I was already on the phone with him, he told me he didn't know.
Mhm.
But we were planning to go for my daughter's birthday to Disney,
Object,
so
you're saying? As to what Mr. Garcia told her. What they talked about.
I sustain the objection.
You were planning to go where that weekend?
to Disney for my daughter's birthday,
Because your daughter's birthday was
May 30th,
And this was May.
25th. He got arrested May 25th.
Right. Did you know that this had anything to do with anything in Tallahassee?
I think he said on the phone, like, they asked him about Tallahassee, and I was like, well, what about Tallahassee, you know? Well, why would they ask you about Tallahassee, basically?
Now, let's talk about his arrest.
Yes.
Okay. When Mr. Garcia was arrested, describe for the jury the media attention surrounding his arrest.
Well, apparently it was everywhere. It was on Facebook, so it was on Facebook. I believe it was on the news. I really kind of just shut down and didn't want to really hear about anything.
And there is a recording of you when he's arrested, right?
I think so.
And how do you sound on the phone when
Oh, when I was
you found out he was arrested?
I was distraught.
Did you think at that time that Mr. Garcia had anything to do with the murder?
No.
At some point, is it very soon, are you privy to the warrant that was drafted for Mr. Garcia?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And it laid out basically the entire case
Yes.
against Mr. Garcia and Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Right. Do you know if that warrant was leaked to the media? And were you able to view it online yourself?
Yes.
You're not arrested at this time.
No, ma'am.
Did you go and retain an attorney?
At that time, I retained an attorney for him.
Okay. Now, when did you find out that you were a suspect or somehow involved in this?
It was kind of like a back and forth. I think, when I retained his attorney, and then his attorney was kind of telling me, the situation. He's kind of like laying out kind of what's going on. And that's when he kind of like advised me that I might have to retain an attorney. And I told him, why do I have to retain an attorney?
Mm-hmm.
And, he kind of just gave me a little bit more facts. He's like, oh, we'll wait. What's going to
That's what you're
happen?
saying.
Sustain.
Why did you stop talking to most of your friends?
It was embarrassing.
Were people trying to reach out to you?
Everybody was trying to reach out to me.
And did you ignore most of them?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you come to find out that a warrant for you had been prepared and released to the media?
I can't give a specific date because all those dates are kind of meshing together.
But this was after Mr. Garcia was arrested.
After he was arrested, when did I find out a warrant was out for me?
Well, that there was this document that was.
Oh, yeah, because there's no warrant that was out for me. They just arrested me.
You remember when the probable cause affidavit for you and Charlie was released?
Oh,
to
that
the media?
19-page?
That 19-page
Yeah.
document?
Yes.
But no one came and arrested you.
No.
But somehow it was out on the internet.
It was out everywhere, yes.
Okay. There is no question in your mind that the state thought you were a suspect in this.
Oh, they were making me a suspect.
All right. And you heard when they were talking about how you were packing up your stuff and leaving?
Yes, ma'am.
Describe for the jury what was going on in your mind and what was happening there.
When I was packing up the stuff, it's because I had to go for my daughter's birthday to Orlando, so I was already packing up. I kind of had pre-packed clothes already for, the whole weekend stay that we had.
Were you also scared to stay in that house after Mr. Garcia was arrested?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you move or go and stay with?
Well, actually, my brother advised me that my family didn't feel comfortable for me to live there by myself with the kids and with everything that was going on, how he got arrested.
You didn't flee the country.
No, I did not.
You went to your brother's house in Broward.
Yes.
When you get a good stopping point, Mr. Watson, jury's probably about due for a break. Is it
Oh, yes, Judge, I was agreeing. Yes.
now a good time? All right, we'll take 10 minutes. Either side, anything?
No, sir.
All right, 10 minutes.